Hello, I'm Jenny Wu, the founder of Mind Brain Parenting. We provide award-winning anytime and anywhere social and emotional learning games, tools, and courses for young people from elementary all the way through college. Our 52 essential conversations, relationships, coping, and critical thinking skills tools have been featured by Harvard University and Castle and are used in schools, homes, and therapy in 50 plus countries. Today, I am super excited to talk to Jennifer Shope, the Deputy Chief Academic Officer at the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, which is an online public school serving over 11,000 students from kindergarten through 12th grade. The PA Cyber School's online learning environments, personalized instructional methods, and choices of curricula connect students and their families with state certified and highly qualified teachers and rich academic content that is aligned to school standards. And as a public school, PA Cyber is open for enrollment by any school-age children residing in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and does not charge tuition to students or families. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited about our conversation.
Me too. And time really flies because you and I connected during the 2020 and 2021 academic school year, which was really a time during the pandemic when most of the schools across the nation and really around the world were scrambling to develop and execute online learning for the very first time. And so there were a lot of reactive activities around putting out fire and mitigating overwhelm and burnout. And so I just have to confess that it was really refreshing when I got an email from you. And it just, it sounded so thoughtful and proactive where you've shared your school's multi-year school-wide social emotional learning initiative and your vision for embedding the 52 Essential Card series to really support not just students, but also parents, caregivers, teachers, and your supporting staff. So I'm excited today to learn more about the comprehensive social emotional learning initiatives that are happening at your school. But like one question I just have to get out of the way, right? That I've been itching to ask before we even go into the social emotional aspect, and perhaps it's connected. So PA Cyber School has been around since the 2000s as one of the largest, most experienced and successful online public schools in the nation. So I think it's an understatement to say that you've been way ahead of the game in terms of providing quality online learning during the pandemic. But why were families opting for virtual learning even before the pandemic?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So it is definitely, like you said, an interesting time in education and in the world. In PA Cyber, we've been around for 21 years. And recently there has been, a new focus on online schools, right, as a result of the pandemic. And I believe that really the last year and a half, students and families are now more comfortable with online learning than they were in the past. And they're more willing to look at online schools like ours as an option for their children. So I think, we have 11,000 students at our school, which means we have 11,000 unique and specific reasons why a family would choose us. And those reasons, they vary. Maybe a child or a family member has an illness. Maybe the family is looking for more specialized course offerings. There are certain family situations, whether, they're English learners or their student has special needs, or they're gifted, or maybe they're just not satisfied with their local school district. And the list just goes on and on. So for us as a school, whether children are here with us for a short period of time or whether they spend their entire K to 12 educational experience with us, we just want to make sure that we impact them in a positive way and that we really prepare them for their future when they walk out of our doors. So that's kind of what we have been doing. And obviously we've grown over the course of time, but that is our goal.
Yeah. And so when COVID happened, what were some of the trends that you were seeing in terms of enrollments to your school? Like, how did it impact your school?
So COVID definitely had an impact on us. There were a lot of families that were searching for an alternative because I think you had mentioned that, brick and mortar schools were new to the online learning platform. And so for PA Cyber, right, we already had an online curriculum in place. We had the technology supports already set. And so when families decided to choose our school, all of that was already given to them. They would come in, they would enroll, they'd get an entire technology package. All of our teachers were accustomed to working with students online and teaching online. And so for us, while the pandemic did impact us in other ways, the teaching and learning experience really was very similar to what it had been previously. So that just kind of continued on. And I think that's why some families and students gravitated towards our school.
Yeah, that is amazing. And you mentioned getting a technology package, right? Those were the things that households were struggling with, right? The Chromebooks, the internet access. And I think I read it somewhere where these were really provided for and taken care of. And so that ease of like peace of mind is amazing, tremendous.
Yes, I think that's really what it was, right? Families were struggling with so many challenges at that time. And to have a school that when you enrolled was able to send you, the laptop and the mouse and the calculator and just make sure that all of the platforms were already working seamlessly. It just kind of put those families at ease. At least it was one thing that they could check off their list.
Yeah, definitely. So then let's go into your multi-year social emotional learning initiative. Why now, right? And why social emotional learning?
Yeah. So just to kind of provide a little bit of background and put everything into context. So, we're located out of the state of Pennsylvania. And like most states, we get essentially what's called a report card that tells us our strengths and weaknesses as a school. And a few years back, our school was put on what's called a school improvement plan in an effort for us to raise our graduation rates because those were a little bit lower for our school. And so, of course, you can imagine with something like that, there was a lot of focus that was being placed on academics and classes and the student supports, things like tutoring and interventions. And all of those discussions were so relevant and important. But then there came a time where the team realized, yeah, scores and grades are important, but we cannot forget about the rest of the pieces that make up that whole child. And we need to support the needs of every student K to 12, regardless of whether they were getting ready to graduate or not. And that's when SEL or social emotional learning really started, at least under that name within our school setting. And so I think right when we were really internalizing what's important, we started to look at, like most people, our vision in our mission statement. And the last sentence in our mission statement, it talks about teaching in a culture of caring. And so we wanted to make sure that we were doing just that, teaching our students in a culture of caring. And that really went hand in hand with the SEL mindset. So to get into, how our SEL journey started, we started having conversations in the fall, winter of 2020, right before COVID had hit. And I mean, who would have ever dreamed about the social emotional needs that our children and adults would be experiencing as a result of the pandemic? But I would encourage, all schools or anyone who's listening to this, that even if you haven't started, to just jump right in, because it's never too late to focus on such an important area. But for us, we had assembled, a small SEL team made up of representatives across the school. And I think one of the things that's important to note is that our CEO was actually part of that team, which kind of shows you the buy-in all the way from, the top of the organization. But then in addition to, myself, our CEO, we also included people like an elementary and a secondary assistant principal, because we wanted representation across the grade levels, a school counselor, a school psychologist, homeless liaison, right? And then we'd bring others into the conversation when it made sense. And so I know I gave a little bit of a long background about how SEL got started in our school, but hopefully that kind of helps when we get into talking about what were some of those, goals that our school had.
Yeah, I love to hear about the goals. And but before that, I think being able to align all of the stakeholders and provide sort of really clear values of why we're doing this is such an integral step in implementing really anything, within an organization. So I think that is truly amazing. So yeah, tell me a little bit about your short-term and long-term goals of implementing the initiatives.
Sure. So our first year implementing SEL, our goals were actually very simple. So first, we wanted to make sure everyone at our school, from our leaders to our regional office representatives to our call center staff, that everyone just understood what SEL was. Because if you don't understand something, you're never going to be able to implement it effectively. So that was goal number one. And then second, we just wanted to create opportunities that would make a difference for students and families. And with those two very simple, short goals, that's really how our team started planning. And so for us, it wasn't really about how many things we could accomplish, but did the things that we did implement make a difference, and were they effective? And that was really what our team continued to talk about, every time that we met. And so in year one, which was our first year of trying to implement something, we really accomplished four main things. And the first thing we did was we created an SEL guidebook for our staff to use. And that was for everybody. So all 800 of our staff received this guidebook, and it contained just very simple ideas for our teachers and staff to implement immediately, whether they were on a call with a parent, whether they were in a class with a student, whether a student had come into one of our regional offices and was experiencing some type of struggle, there were ideas in there for them. And second, we implemented an SEL series called Thriving in COVID and Beyond, because that was what we were dealing with at that point in time. And the sessions talked about things like stress management and navigating the holidays during COVID, practicing gratitude, all of those things that go hand in hand with, the card decks and SEL in general. And third, we kind of started a girls talk group that allowed girls in particular grade levels to get together and talk about what was on their mind, what was, bothering them, or things that were going well in their lives. And that ended up being so successful that year two, we are now implementing a guys talk group as well. And then last, we also started an SEL newsletter that we would send to all of our staff and families, kind of giving them background on what social emotional learning was, resources that would be relevant, and then ideas that they could implement just in their own homes. And really, we made sure that everyone was focused on those initiatives, and that our teachers, were able to provide us feedback about what was happening in the classroom, so that we could really then, get into that next phase, which is where your SEL card decks come into play.
Okay, very cool. It's really amazing. I mean, the four things you've listed are very much action oriented, and they're tangible things day in, day out. Students, teachers, staff, everybody is a part of and can do. And I think that's truly amazing, because so many schools I've worked with, sometimes, great intentions, but we tend to get stuck at the very strategic level, and that type of analysis by paralysis, right? It never quite makes it truly into actualizing what these strategic visions were trying to do. So that's amazing. So you mentioned, so phase two, where the cards come in. And, I just want to say I am super honored to have the 52 Essential Card Series to be a part of your multi-year SEL initiative. And, I like when I got the email, I was really curious. I was like, how did you find out about our SEL games and tools? And so can you talk a little bit about how you found out about it and really your process and metrics and determining that these series of cards were the right fit for your school?
Yes. So with year one underway, right, our team really needed to start planning for the future and how we were going to move forward with year two. And our team would meet on, every few weeks to kind of talk about where we are. And one of our assistant principals that was in that group actually forwarded me a link to a website, which was your website, Mind Brain Parenting, and simply said, I came across this website and these cards, they're approved by Castle. What do you think? And so we researched the cards, and everyone on the team fell in love with them immediately. So, just what we were hearing about the testimonials on the site. And so we ended up ordering one of each of the three sets. And I know you now have four, but at the time, the three that were available, we had ordered for everyone on our team. And we immediately, as we started going through them, could see the benefit that they would have if we would implement them correctly and in the correct fashion. And so it was funny because everyone on our team kind of gravitated towards certain cards or even certain decks, but we came to, a consensus that your 52 Essential Relationship card deck was the perfect place for us as a school to start to use with our students and our families. And you kind of talked about the data and the metrics and how we determined what we were going to use. So before we invested in a purchase like this, we wanted to see it in action and we wanted to test it out ourselves. So each of us on that team made a decision that we would just take some time and use these cards in our daily lives, right? With our own family, with our own friends, and report back. And that's just what we did. So if you want, I can kind of share with you even, a story of, yeah. So for some background, I have two boys, one's in fourth grade and the other's in third grade. So at the elementary level. And I love my kids so much, right? But like all parents, sometimes it's hard in the day-to-day life to kind of fit in those conversations that go beyond just the basics between school and work and activities and meals, right? There's just so much going on in the family unit and the family structure these days. And so I decided just to see how easily could I fit these into what was going on in our lives. And so for our family, especially during COVID, my kids usually at some point on the weekend would FaceTime their cousin who is similar in age to them. And knowing this was occurring, I didn't do a lot of planning. I just decided to jump into their conversation one Saturday while I was cleaning around the house and they were talking, and simply said, I have a question for all of you that I want you to think about before you answer. And then once you think about the question, we'll all have a chance to share out. And so the first question was from the green card deck that we were all kind of working with, the 52 Essential Relationships. And I pulled out the one that said care. And it said, name 3 things in life that are important to you. And they thought about it for a while and they shared out. And my youngest son, he went first and he had said, my family. And then second, he said video games, right? To which I, as his mom, was biting my tongue, but let him continue. And then third, he said Ellie's house, which was his cousin that was on the call. So that made her feel so good inside. And then I just asked him to talk about each one, right? Because that's the great thing about these cards. You can just kind of start a conversation. And when I found out why he felt that video games were so important, I had such a different perspective. I found out that He liked video games because he found that it was a way to get away from all the craziness and the mean things that kids say in school because the video games couldn't say anything back to him. And wow, I mean, as a mom, that was so eye-opening, and there was so much more to uncover there, and that would come in time. But then his brother and his cousin wanted to share, and they wanted to know who was mean and what, and it was just a free-flowing conversation that started with one simple question from those cards. So after that, they enjoyed that so much that we went on and we went to another, card. And if you want, I can even share, that example with you. And it was dream. And, these are little kids. And it was the one that said, if you could solve any problem in your life or in the world, what would it be and why? And because of the flexibility that these cards allow, in my kid being more elementary, I simply just removed the word life, right? That's the great thing about these. You can use them however you see fit. And so the question to them was, if you could solve any problem in the world, what would it be? And I wasn't sure how they would answer this, right? If you look at the categories, this one was a little higher than the last one. And we're talking about 8 and 10-year-old kids here. But I was so surprised at the depths of their answers. And it just shows that these cards can be used at any age, which is so fantastic. They started organically talking about things like endangered species and littering and pollution and kids and families in hard situations, and even like climate change, right? When did they hear about that? Yeah. And would they have ever talked about these things on a normal FaceTime call? Probably not. But, when these cards were involved, it just lit up their minds with one simple question. And that's when we got back to our small group after all of us kind of implemented these with our own family and friends. We all had similar stories to share. And it was then when we were sharing our personal stories, that we realized how powerful these cards could be in making connections that hadn't been made before. And so that is really, how it started, why we chose these cards. And we realized that all of us, no matter what our situations were finding success using them.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for these powerful, just real world examples. And I mean, I'll just share a little bit. To be honest, these were really my intentions, right? How can I make them and as culturally responsive and to the context of the individual families and children? And I think a lot of the times as adults, right, we tend to see ourselves as the expert. We've been in this world longer, right? We know what they're going to say. We know how they think, right? But it's really peeling back those assumptions and really getting down to more and more of the cores of the why, right? Yes. Why is it that this is important to you? Why is it that you want to do this? And, I think if that enables not just children, sort of that free range, that permission to just, think and play with words, play with thoughts, but it also disarms us and just shedding our assumptions and, our rushing and truly just opening up the adults' eyes at the same time to what the children are saying and thinking. And that is, as you said, right, you can't really do that just simply let's have a meeting, let's do a face-to-face
right.
talk, right? Or sometimes even it's also hard at schools, but being able to do it anytime, anywhere is the beauty of that.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I love those examples, and it just warms up your heart, right? And you mentioned being surprised. So I had done a bunch of just sitting in observations and educators with their children, but at the same time, also just parents with no background in sort of facilitating these conversations, right? Or what is SEL, right? That type of thing, because I wanted to understand, can this be done in any household, right? And that was really the point. And so this is self-guided. And as you mentioned, you don't have to read the questions exactly. It is developmentally, right? It depends on where your child is, but it certainly opens the door to those important dialogues. Yeah, so I know you did the 52 essential relationships during the summer when the school isn't
Yes.
even in session. That is so unique because I have requests in terms of summer school, we'll give it to the parents, but this was like you were ahead of the game again, like during, so can you tell me a little bit about your intention for during the summer?
Sure. So, like you said, we sent these card decks in June, when everyone was getting ready to leave for the summer. And the reason that we chose to do it in the summer is that we wanted our families to know that we were supporting them, even if their children weren't in the classroom. And it wasn't just right. All right, here's the summer. We'll see you next August when classes start again. We wanted to make sure that they had the support that they needed because, right, it was still a very trying time, in the world and in families. And we just wanted to make sure that they were able to use that time in a way that they could build relationships with each other. And we know that data everywhere, supports that when there's greater relationships, there's a correlation between that family environment, classroom grades, attendance, graduation rates. And that's really what we were hoping for. It wasn't necessarily just on the academics. We wanted to make sure that we were helping families to build, that together. And it was so great. So prior to, because again, it was getting ready for, the summer when a lot of people were like, yay, no more school. We did send information out to all of our families in one of our SEL newsletters that would explain, why these cards were coming, what we plan to do with them, the purpose of them. And then a couple days after when the cards were to be received, because you were so great about sending everyone the cards exactly when you said, we had scheduled a lunch and learn so that all of our families, our students, they could just come. It was a short hour session during the day, and they could learn more about what these cards were for and even hear personal experiences from some members of our team so that they could get ideas, right? Because parents aren't necessarily educators in and of themselves. And so it's always beneficial to hear how it's worked for other people. And then they can kind of trigger their own thoughts on, oh, you know what, if I do it this way, that would work for my household. So that was the first part of, sending our families those cards in the summer. And we received such great feedback from the people that reached out and said, thank you so much, for doing something like this during these months.
Yeah, wow, that is tremendous support. I had never heard of that before, so kudos. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about in terms the teachers and staff side. What were you doing in those areas?
Yeah, so we sent the 52 essential relationship card deck to our students and families, but having our teachers and staff involved in this process was as equally as important to us. And so during our conversations, because the families had those, we wanted our staff to have something as well. So we sent a couple months later the 52 essential conversation card deck to all of our staff. And so both groups had a card deck over the summer. And we had sent them the card deck a little bit later in the month of August so that as we were preparing to come back to school, they would have that. They would be able to think about how they could use it, not only in the classroom, but outside of the classroom. And the reason that we chose to send them, the different deck of cards and to send them that deck of cards was really fourfold when we kind of looked at it. We wanted our teachers to be able to use these cards in the classroom with our students, kind of like an extension of what was being done at home, but with different types of questions. And then we also wanted our staff to be able to use them when talking with families, because our school, even though we're online, we do have, 9 regional offices across the state that students come into, and they do activities, and they meet with other students and staff. And so that was a great place to be able to use them, along with, right, our counselors could use them within counseling sessions with students, and even the people that are working with students on different calls would be able to implement them. And then, third, we wanted to have our staff use them internally. I mean, how many times now are we meeting on Zoom, on Teams, whatever platform we're meeting on, right? Every now and then, why don't you just mix up the beginning of it a little bit and start with one of these? It might be a great conversation starter, especially if you're going into a meeting, where it's a heavy topic and you need to discuss some things. So it's a really good team building experience to use these. And then last, just looking to the larger community aspect, we actually hoped our own staff would take them and just use them with their own children and family members and friends, just like we had done, because again, we wanted to be able to support them individually as well, not just say, as someone at PA Cyber, this is what we want you to do for the students at PA Cyber. We want you to take these and be able to get something out of them personally as well. And the tools and the cards, I mean, they have just proven to be so beneficial. And, even though right now we focus on the 52 essential relationships and the 52 essential conversation card decks, we actually have other leaders at the school, including our counselors and our school psychologists, that are using the 52 coping skills with students as they see appropriate. So there is just a place for all of these. And we have found that, blending that family unit with the teachers, with their own, personal experiences, it's really just proven beneficial.
Yeah. And, this just resonates so well with your mission, right? That culture of caring. And I think what I love a lot about this is really that caring from inside and out and everywhere. And, mindset, we talk about that is such a huge thing for students, right? But from what I'm hearing, you really prioritize the mindsets of the adults, the supporting adults, whether it be parents, teachers, and staff, and encouraging them, right, to learn new skill sets, new language, and have that confidence to engage in these really authentic conversations and relationships with each other and with the people that they were supporting. I think that's really tremendous.
Yes, yeah. And, our biggest thing was, don't be afraid to try something. Don't be afraid to fail, because when you fail, you just learn from it. And, these are meant for you to make fun or have fun. And any new initiative, there's bound to be, challenges that come with it. And that's the thing we just kept reiterating to everybody. This is about growth mindset. Like you said, just try things and see what works. And you will eventually find out what is going to be successful for you.
Yeah, well said. So, I guess these are my questions, but I'm curious, what are some of your lessons learned or sort of best practice? What has sort of resonated with maybe the teachers or the parents that you've seen in terms of the focus areas within social emotional learning?
Yeah, so it's funny that you asked that question, because, every teacher seems to do things in their own way, and what works for them may not work for someone else, or what works for a first grade teacher might not work for an 8th grade teacher. But we have found that if the teachers just figure out, where it fits in their lesson. A lot of them love to do it first thing in the morning, or first thing with that class, because the students are always so chatty. And how do they fit that in? Some like to do it in the middle of the class to give students a break, when they're learning the content. And I think what's great, about our teachers is that they're so willing, and our staff, they're so willing to share what has worked and what hasn't worked with them. So at future in-service events that we've held, where all of our staff get together, we have actually brought in teachers and school counselors and other staff and had them share best practices for what has worked with them in the classroom. Because it's one thing to hear it from, us sharing what worked, but it's another thing to hear it from a colleague who is doing the same thing as you day in and day out. And I think just the being able to experience that together and give resources and share in that capacity has helped push this forward throughout all of our classrooms.
Yeah, it really sounds like you made a learning community that is truly thriving, right, during COVID and beyond. And I have certainly been learning so much from you. I think one of my takeaway when you had shared one of the slide decks was one of the teachers actually made a game, like a game board game out of the deck of cards. And so they could use it at home on the family, like a breakfast table or something, and not just using cards, but creating a game board. I thought that was like ingenious. That was really cool. So definitely keep us all updated on more best practices. I'm sure there are many more to come. And with that said, I just want to thank you so much, Jennifer, for your time today. I've certainly learned a lot, and I hope our viewers have as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. It has been great using the cards, and we look forward to continuing in the future.
Thank you.